Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Media Talks TV. I'm Tony J. If you're new here, hit the like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell because we got more videos coming up. Now, this is a follow up video from last week's video that I did about the death of the death of cable. But there's a new normal coming to the media industry. And I don't talk a lot about the media industry so much of the dynamics of what goes on. But last week I took some time out during Thanksgiving and I decided to do a little homework and understanding business and mergers. And the one thing that I've understood, what I'm starting to get, uh I'm starting to understand the process of the economy. And with the economy, because I didn't know so much about the economy that I thought I knew. And I'm starting to understand history and how this new landscape of tech taking over the media industry is actually kind of going back to what was happening during the year 2000s. And if anybody remembers living in that era of the year 2000s, that was during the dot-com boom. And the dot-com boom was basically all these companies like that are 25 years or older, Amazon, Google, Priceline, Expedia, uh, Orbit, all these tech companies, all these new internet companies that were popping up, they were being funded by Wall Street. And because you inject so much money into a lot of these companies, the IPO, which is the initial public offering, it goes up. So if you were able to get into the investment game during the 90s, right now, you'd be rich, to be honest. If you kept your stock in Google, if you kept your stock in Priceline or Orbit or any of these old tech companies, because they're now considered old. If they're over 25 years old, they're considered the grandfathered companies. Amazon, Apple, you're you will probably be rich by now. And I didn't really think about this because back then we never really took the stock market seriously. And you know, I've started to learn more and more about busts and booms. And any foundation of understanding business and business cycles, one of the things that I understood is that businesses cycle in and they cycle out. And whatever profit that they have and they generate a profit, they could sell that company and make a new company. That's if your current business that you're building is so self-sustainable that it generates a profit for its shareholders and its stakeholders. And one of the things that I understood about that era is everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every time new bubbles form, you got to get in at the bottom, never get in at the middle as far as investing. Well, now we got the old tech companies, the current tech companies, buying old traditional media now. And I feel like this is really like the beginning of something, a new phenomenon right now in the tech industry where they're buying, large tech companies are buying media companies now. And whether you believe it or not, every company that you start is a media company. I heard that from Gary V, that no matter what company you start, you're a media company first. You build a product, people want that product, and that generates profit. You create content around that product, video. So every business gotta have some type of YouTube channel or video to promote their product. So video marketing is like a big thing in this business. And understanding who Larry Ellison is and David Ellison, I got this book called The Soft Wars, and I don't know if y'all probably remember it, but um Soft Wars Soft Wars was basically a story about Larry Ellison. Let me see. Hold up. Soft Wars. I think. Yeah, Soft War. So I have this book and it's about Larry Ellison. And I got to really sit back and actually take a look at who Larry Ellison is. You know, if you ever get a chance, make sure you get that book, Soft War. And I had to sit back and I had to think, all these tech executives, people that got started in Silicon Valley, they've generated so much money, enough money to actually buy traditional media companies now. Traditional media is at a standstill. And according to this article by a Hollywood Reporter, there's a plan to revitalize CBS, and the merger, they say that they're very close to getting FCC approval to merge a tech company with a traditional media company, and that traditional media company is CBS. Remember when I told you in a previous video that CBS was owned by the Redstones? That Sherry Redstone was the last president after Sumner Redstone died. Sumner Redstone was this guy, this behemoth of a media giant. His shows, well, not his shows, but his media company spanned almost 60 years. Viacom and CBS used to be separate media companies at one point. And CBS, after, well, in 1971, of course, CBS and Viacom became one company. Then by the 1980s, they became separate companies. And there's this kind of like this marriage between this corporate entity and the media that has kind of made CBS kind of cycle in and out of eras. Because one minute, both CBS and Viacom were separate companies. Then they separated themselves. Then they merged again in the 80s. Then they separated again in the 90s. Then they came back together again in the 2000s. And then it's this kind of whirlwind marriage between corporations and media and corporate media. And of course, King World Productions, that's another company that was owned by, you know, by something in Redstone, but it was owner the owner was National Amusements. So if you look at it, they had CBS Media Ventures. That was another one. Separate entities. King World Productions. And if you don't know King World Productions, that's kind of like, you know, they own all the soap operas on TV, cooking shows, and the game shows like Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy. All of that was owned by another company called Metro Media. Metro Media became Fox. When Rupert Murdoch brought Metro Media, he turned it into Fox. Used to be Dumont Television Network. So, of course, you got all these companies, all these old media companies: Disney, ABC, Telepictures, Universal Television, Desilu, Metro Goldwyn Mayer. All these big media ventures, they're kind of getting swallowed up by tech. King World Productions at one point owned the syndication rights, I believe. Don't quote me on that. To I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy did not play on CBS because they didn't own the syndication rights to it. So they stopped airing on CBS in the 70s and the 80s. They only had special programming for I Love Lucy. And then, of course, when the whole idea of syndication came into play, there was a law that the FCC put out that a media company cannot own exclusive licensing to its own productions, its own TV shows. So they couldn't own the licensing outright. They had to license it to small, smaller owner operated local media companies. So, say for instance, Married with Children, which is one of the shows that came on Fox, one of the staple shows that comes on Fox. Say if Fox produces and distributes Married with Children, okay? Well, they can hold the licensing, but they can't have exclusive rights to the show. They'd have to buy the license back outright in order to hold distribution rights. to the show. They don't have distribution rights. Only small local television outlets. So in Baltimore here, we have Fox 45 or WNUV TV 54. So what happens is they'll take maybe short episodes by them and then air it in a time slot. That's programming. Maybe somebody from the head of programming might say, hey, I want two 30-minute episodes of Married with Children back to back marathon run on this station. Then you had to buy the licensing for those slots. And how long they keep that licensing is up to them. Then they could say, well, we stopped airing it and then we switched it out for another Fox production like The Simpsons. So then they switch out The Simpsons and they brought a licensing for maybe short episodes of The Simpsons and syndication. Or then they switch out The Simpsons for maybe like Martin. Two episodes back to back of Martin, or 1 hour block. So that used to be the old way of doing media back then through programming and syndication rights and licensing. Well, the new way of doing media is to own catalogs. So every show that was produced on CBS becomes a media asset. What would be a media asset? It's kind of like owning a piece of stock, right? So I believe, and this is my hypothesis, that tech is going to take over old media to the point where they're going to own streaming rights and licensing exclusively to create other streaming networks to own the exclusivity of licensing to these programs that were once produced on CBS. So if that happens, that means that nobody is able to actually outright own own any of the media that is produced anymore. So now it can't be owned outright. It gives a lot of power to a lot of these media companies. Tech has revolutionized the way to say, I can make money off of this and not have to produce the physical media. Because back then, physical media just used to be a thing where you put it on DVD and you make money off of those DVDs, and then after that they cycle them out and maybe put them back on TV or maybe pay TV or free TV. So says CBS revealed in filing by Skydance and Paramount. So Skydance is owned by Larry Ellison. Skydance produced several movies already. So let me see something. So Skydance owned, I guess they have several films. They've already produced Top Gun, Mission Impossible, Family Plan, Spy Kids, Heart of Stone. Like they produce a good amount of movies. They're a media company, but they're also a tech company too. Hmm. about to produce the next Mission Impossible. So they got their hands really full with what they want to do, you know. So it's just a matter of time where where it's going to go, you know. So let's get back. I'm going to jump back into the article, break down what's going to happen. So David Ellison, that's the son. Larry Ellison is the father. So let's see. David Ellison would be David Ellison would be 41. Yeah, Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison would be 80 years old. Yeah, Larry Ellison would be 80. So I guess they'll have Larry Ellison will have voting control over Paramount Pictures. Says a new filing with the Federal Communications Commission outlines a plan to strengthen and revitalize the CBS broadcast network and its owned and operated stations, which are the local stations, should Oracle founder Larry Ellison be allowed to assume control of the broadcast licenses. Ellison, the father of Skydance founder and CEO David Ellison, who would be the future CEO of Paramount should the merger go through, will control the new company through a handful of corporate entities alongside Gary Grandanelli's Redbird Capital. Companies controlled by Larry Ellison are contributing the bulk of the cash required to get the deal done, hence the voting control. But first, it has to receive approval from the government, and in addition to an antitrust review by the Federal Trade Commission, Department of Justice, that means approval by the FCC to transfer the CBS broadcast licenses. That requirement would lead, or would let that requirement led to the filing, which outlines the deal and the players involved. And the filing, Ellison notes that they do not currently own any businesses with a broadcast license and thus will not reduce competition in the space. And they tout their plans to invest in both CBS and its local stations. CBS and the owner operators of local stations and their robust distribution networks are among the company's strongest and most stable assets. The filing says with an improved balance sheet, New Paramount will be able to make strategic investments in the legendary news gathering and report efforts of the national CBS television network and the company's owner and operated local stations. These investments will ensure that both the national network, which reaches all television markets, and the owner operators will continue to serve as trusted sources of news. The investment in the CBS television network similarly will help ensure popular live sports and highly rated entertainment programming remain available to viewers over the air and benefit CBS affiliate station to turn these iconic broadcast assets. See what I'm telling you? Media assets now. They're assets. Will act as pillars for the growth and success of new Paramount more broadly. With regard to the owner and operating, the filing lays out a rough plan to preserve and enhance the legacy and broad reach of the national CBS network and the company's 28 owned and operated local television broadcast stations while leveraging their historic strengths to successfully meet the challenges presented by today's dynamic and disruptive media landscape. So then you got to ask once the merger goes through once the merger goes through, what does this mean for those who have a share of CBS or Viacom stock? What happens to Viacom's stock? Because Viacom owns CBS. And also there's a publishing arm, Simon and Schuster. So what happens to that? They haven't given us a real clear indication about what happens when they merge this company, what happens to the shareholders that were under Sumner Redstone's helm, because Viacom is a part of that. There's really no mention of Viacom. It's like they're just completely going to eliminate the company. I think, let's see, it says, I think if there's going to be change for CBS, it's going to be that we're going to probably manage it a bit more aggressively for cash flow, meaning making some harder decisions on time periods and things like that going forward, which you have to when you have a declining business. But there's really no change in the overall vision for the asset other than we believe in it. It's going to be actively part of all of our plans going forward. The Hollywood Reporter. So, looking at it and thinking about it, there's no mention of the shareholders. And so I guess that's one thing you have to worry about. Remember, these companies, uh, CBS has been around since 1929. So it's coming up on maybe it's a 95, 96 year old company. And, with that, it has a long history, has a story history. Starts with William Pelly. And, before it was CBS television, was CBS radio. And once it was CBS radio, and once they jumped into television, it became what was called the Tiffany Network. So, you know, you're not just buying a, a new business from scratch. You're buying a legacy. And with legacy, sometimes they get redefined, you know. But my main reason for worrying about this in particular is because this might be the new normal in business now. That tech is planning to take over the media industry in such a way that we won't have any type of power over the things that we watch. Now, if you look at Dave Zaslav, who is the head of HBO Max, or Max as they call it, something happened very recently that I never agreed with. They cut a lot of the old legacy programming out, which was troubling. So anybody that grew up on stuff like Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Laboratory, cartoons from Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network is no longer a cable channel anymore. I don't know what you're going to call it, but it's no longer a cable channel. Cable has been gone for a long time. So when I first got Max, I used to watch Dexter's Laboratory on Max. And I used to watch Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which were two staples and what made Cartoon Network very special. They cut those programs. They dumped a lot of programs. In fact, the only cartoons you might see on the Warner Brothers own media, which is Max, will probably be Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. And you don't see a lot of the MGM cartoons anymore on the streaming service. They've cut those programs. They've cut them completely. And I could probably understand why, because they don't want the stuff that's associated with keeping those programs on there. Some of these cartoons, they're like 80 years old, but even then, I've grown up to actually love those cartoons. But because CBS doesn't, well, not CBS, but because Warner Brothers doesn't want to go through the controversy of keeping them on it, they just wipe them out completely and they keep their staples. And what do they mean? What do I mean by their staple programs? Jetsons, Flintstones, Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes. So they're keeping that, but they've cut Johnny Bravo, they've cut Powerpuff Girls to a certain extent. You won't find Powerpuff Girls on there. I don't know. But and then most of the stuff on there also Adult Swim, which they haven't really taken a lot of the stuff from Adult Swim because it's become a separate entity now. But Adult Swim programming that we had in the early 2000s, that's being cut out, you know. So when I say this is becoming a new normal, I want you to heed what's going to be happening in the current landscape of media when it comes to streaming. They're going to make you pay more money to see these shows. And anybody that doesn't have them recorded or own media, you just kind of like shit out of luck in some ways. Because you no longer own, you can't outright own the media no more. That's the new reality in this whole thing. If you grew up off it and you had DVD collection, fine. But after that, if you don't own it, you might have to pay for it if you don't own it outright. Then if you try to upload your videos to YouTube, if you got old episodes, they're gonna smack it down and put an injunction. You can't post it. Third party copyright. Stuff like that. And this is what I was talking about when I say, you know, how important it is to be able to have access to old media. Being a media archivist is just so fundamentally important because those who own visuals can change the narrative around certain things. And this goes back to this whole thing about not allowing kids to watch certain older cartoons because certain older cartoons carry certain racial undertones to it, with the whole Tom and Jerry thing with the Mammy Two Shoes and stuff like that, and Alma Fudd being black and all this stuff. Yeah, you don't want kids to see that because they take it out of context and it's very racially stereotypical. But people should have access to those cartoons, even if they don't like it, and even if it is ugly. It's a part of history. And when you don't have access to those media entities, and you have corporations like Skydance trying to buy large, old traditional media companies, then they can have the right to restrict you from accessing that media. So then you don't own it, or you have to buy the licensing in order to access that media. So now they're going to make you pay for it. And that's why it's so important to have people like media archivists that document media and attitudes that change in media, because this right here, this is just the new normal now. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it because we don't have the money. Corporate entities control media now. And that's a scary thing. Especially in a democracy. Tech moguls have no business buying large media companies. And that's going to be just the ugly reality of this whole thing. But this has been another Media Talks TV. Like I said, you want to go learn about these guys, Larry Ellison, David Ellison. There's books out, there's information. I probably will put a link to this book down in the box, down in the description box. But it's important to know the people who own your media, who own your your access to media. It's a fundamental right in a democracy to have access to information, and it shouldn't come at a price. That's what I'm trying to convey. But you can write down in the comments how you feel about this new normal and what you suggest going forward. Because Silicon Valley is trying to buy big media now. This big fish eat little fish. Anyway, this has been Tony J. I'm out. Peace.